The scent of industrial-grade lemon cleaner and the faint, dusty ghost of chalk was the perfume of Eleanor's evenings. For 5 years, she had moved through the cavernous, silent halls of Northwood Elementary like a phantom, her gray cart of supplies rattling a soft, solitary rhythm in the echoing quiet. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed a monotonous, lonely tune. She saw the school as no one else did, not as a place of vibrant learning, but as a silent museum of a day's activity. She wiped down desks still sticky with the phantom residue of spilled juice and smeared glue, swept up the day's debris of eraser shavings and the confetti of hole-punched paper, and polished the tiny, ghostly fingerprints of children from windows and chrome water fountains. To the bustling daytime population of teachers and students, she was an invisible presence, the silent force that reset the building to its pristine state each morning. But in the solitude of those nights, her mind was a vibrant, chaotic world away. Tucked into the front pocket of her worn blue work smock was a spiral-bound notebook, its pages filled with frantic scribbles, flowcharts, and sketches of user interface elements. While her hands were busy with rags and disinfectant sprays, her mind was alight with lines of code, debugging complex database queries, and refining user experience pathways. Propped against her cart, her phone would often play podcasts about venture capital, startup culture, and the latest in software development. The confident, ambitious voices of tech innovators were a stark, almost surreal contrast to the blue-collar world she physically inhabited, their words painting a picture of a life she felt she was secretly living. She was building something, bit by bit, in the stolen sacred hours between her shift and a few hours of precious sleep. It was a secret world of pure logic and boundless creativity that felt more her own than the hands calloused by work or the tired feet that ached at the end of every night. Her daughter, Maya, was the sun around which Eleanor's entire universe orbited. At 10 years old, Maya possessed her mother's bright, inquisitive eyes and a spirit that hadn't yet been scuffed and dulled by the world's casual cruelties. She saw no shame in her mother's work. In fact, she saw a unique kind of magic in it. To Maya, Eleanor wasn't just a cleaner. She was the guardian of the school, the keeper of its secrets. "Did you find any cool treasures tonight, Mom?" Maya would ask every morning, her voice thick with sleep as Eleanor, smelling faintly of bleach and exhaustion, would tuck her in after returning from a late shift. It was their reversed schedule ritual. "Let's see," Eleanor would whisper, playing along as she kissed her daughter's warm forehead. "I found a paperclip that had been bent into the shape of a perfect heart, and a red crayon that someone had sharpened so perfectly it looked like a tiny lipstick." "Wow," Maya would breathe, her imagination painting a grand picture of these simple, discarded items. "Sleep well, Mom." "You too, sweetie. Big day tomorrow." The notice for career day came home in Maya's backpack on a Tuesday, tucked inside a folder decorated with unicorn stickers. It was a brightly colored flyer, announcing a day where parents were invited to share their professions with the students. Maya's excitement was a physical force, immediate and absolute. "You have to come, Mom. You just have to," she declared at their small dinner table, pushing the flyer across the worn wood surface with such force it knocked over a salt shaker. "You can tell everyone how you make the school work. You can tell them about the secret passages." Eleanor managed a weak smile. "There are no secret passages, sweetie, just the maintenance corridors." Her heart, however, did a slow, painful somersault. Career day. A day for doctors and lawyers, for architects and business owners to parade their tailored suits and their tangible successes. A day for parents like Cynthia Reynolds. Cynthia was the unofficial queen of the Northwood parent body. Her husband was a well-known surgeon, and she ran a high-end interior design firm that had been featured in magazines. Eleanor had a vivid, cringeworthy memory from a PTA meeting just last month. She had been slipping out the back of the library when Cynthia, holding court by the refreshments table, had said in her loud, clear voice, "It's simply a matter of resource allocation. If we want our children to have the best, we can't be expected to pour money into things like janitorial overtime." She hadn't looked at Eleanor, but she didn't have to. The meaning was as clear as the diamond studs in her ears. The quick, dismissive glances in the hallway, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she saw Eleanor at school events. It all painted a clear picture. To Cynthia, Eleanor was part of the scenery, and a slightly grimy part at that. "Oh, honey," Eleanor began, her voice gentle as she tried to navigate the minefield of her daughter's expectations. "I don't think my job is what they're looking for. It's for parents with, office jobs, people who have PowerPoint presentations." "But your job is important," Maya insisted, her brow furrowed with the pure, unshakable conviction that only a child can possess. "You know everything about the school. You know which faucet in the girls' bathroom squeaks, and that the big door to the gym sticks when it's humid. You know where the bats get in. That's important stuff. The purity of her daughter's faith was both a balm and a knife to the heart. How could she explain that in the eyes of the world, and especially in the mercilessly judgmental eyes of people like Cynthia? Cleaning desks was not a service, but a station. A sign that you hadn't amounted to anything more. She could already hear the whispers, imagine the pitying looks. She saw the unspoken words already forming on Cynthia's perfectly lipsticked mouth. Your mom cleans desks, not mine's. That night, long after Maya was asleep, Eleanor sat at her small cluttered desk, the cool blue glow of her laptop screen illuminating her tired face. She bypassed her usual routine of listening to podcasts, and instead opened the project she'd been pouring her soul into for over a year. The screen lit up with the login portal for Northwood Connect. It was a comprehensive school management application, born from her unique, intimate knowledge of the school's daily inefficiencies. It had a module for teachers to post homework and grades seamlessly. It had a secure, encrypted communication portal for parents and teachers, a vast improvement on the scattered mess of emails and crumpled notes. It had a lunch menu system with integrated allergy alerts and a digital lost and found, complete with photo uploads. It was elegant, intuitive, and solved a dozen problems the school's current clunky, outdated system failed to address. She had built it from nothing, fueled by cheap coffee and a desperate, burning need to prove, if only to herself, that she was more than just the lady with the mop. It was her secret, her pride, and her terrifying hope for a different future. Looking at the polished, professional interface on her screen, a crazy, audacious, terrifying idea began to form. What if she did go to career day? What if she talked not about the job that paid her bills, but about the one that fueled her soul? The thought sent a jolt of pure fear and wild adrenaline through her. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a social risk that could end in profound humiliation. But then she thought of Maya's shining, hopeful face, so full of pride. She couldn't stand the thought of that light being dimmed by her own fear. She had to show her daughter that you are not defined by your job title, but by your passion, your intelligence, and the effort you pour into what you love. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she pulled the crumpled flyer from the recycling bin where she'd tossed it earlier. With a pen that felt impossibly heavy, she signed the permission slip. Next to the line for parent's name, she wrote, Eleanor Vance. And next to profession, she paused for a long moment. Then, with a defiant flourish, she wrote, Building Services and Software Development. It was a stretch, a wild, audacious leap. But it was a leap she knew, for Maya's sake and for her own, she had to take. The week leading up to career day was a quiet storm of anxiety for Eleanor. By day, she wrestled with a knot of dread in her stomach that tightened every time she saw the brightly colored flyer stuck to their refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. By night, at the school, every squeak of her cart and every reflection she caught in the darkened windows seemed to mock her. Software developer? A smudge on the glass would seem to ask. Who are you kidding? Maya, in blissful contrast, was vibrating with an excitement that grew with each passing day. She drew pictures of Eleanor standing in front of a giant computer, typing with lightning speed. She told her friends with the unshakable authority of a 10-year-old, My mom is a computer genius. She builds the internet. Eleanor didn't have the heart to correct her. The gulf between Maya's perception and her own reality felt a mile wide. She decided to hand in the permission slip in person, a small act of forcing her own hand. As she walked into the school office the next afternoon, her stomach lurched. Standing by the secretary's desk, organizing a stack of PTA newsletters with crisp, efficient movements, was Cynthia Reynolds. She was dressed in an elegant cream-colored pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail that probably cost more than Eleanor's entire weekly grocery budget. Eleanor, Cynthia said, her voice smooth and cool. Her eyes did a quick, familiar scan, taking in Eleanor's simple jeans and worn sweater, before landing on the slip in her hand. Dropping something off? Yes, Eleanor said, her voice quieter than she intended. She handed the paper to the school secretary. For career day. Cynthia's perfectly arched eyebrow rose. She leaned over, her expensive perfume wafting over the counter, and casually read the slip upside down. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. Building Services, she read aloud, her tone making the words sound both quaint and slightly dirty. How practical. It will be good for the children to appreciate all the work that goes into keeping their school tidy. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. And software development? Is that a new hobby? The word hobby landed like a small, sharp stone. It was exactly the dismissal she had feared. It wasn't a profession, not a career. It was a little pastime, like knitting or scrapbooking. "It's something I'm working on," Eleanor said, forcing a polite smile while her cheeks burned. "That's lovely," Cynthia said, turning back to her newsletters, her dismissal absolute. "It's so important for everyone to have a creative outlet." Eleanor walked out of the office feeling about 2 inches tall. The encounter, as brief as it was, solidified her resolve. The fear was still there, a cold, heavy weight. But now it was mingled with a hot spark of defiance. A hobby? She would show Cynthia what a hobby looked like. That night, and every night that followed, Eleanor's work took on a new urgency. She cleaned with a focused, almost frantic energy, her mind racing. As she scrubbed graffiti off a bathroom stall, she mentally refined the security protocols for her parent-teacher communication portal. While vacuuming the vast expanse of the library carpet, she mapped out the final lines of her presentation. She didn't have a PowerPoint. She didn't have a fancy suit. But she had Northwood Connect. She practiced her speech to the empty classrooms, her voice gaining strength and confidence with each rehearsal. She decided to frame her presentation as a story of observation and problem-solving. "My first job here at Northwood is to see things other people miss," she practiced, gesturing to the empty desks. "I see the lost sweaters, the forgotten lunch boxes, the notes that never make it home. My second job is to build solutions for those problems." On the morning of career day, Eleanor stood before her closet with a sense of impending doom. It was a sea of practical, faded clothes. Nothing screamed software developer. She finally settled on a pair of black trousers, her newest, least faded pair, and a simple dark blue blouse. It was the best she could do. As she was buttoning the blouse, Maya came into her room. She wasn't wearing her usual bright, mismatched clothes. She had put on a simple dress, one Eleanor had bought for her to wear to a family wedding 2 years ago. "You're dressed up," Eleanor said, surprised. "So are you," Maya replied, beaming. "It's a big day." "You look perfect, Mom. You look like you build important things." Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes. She knelt and hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. Maya's unwavering faith was the only armor she needed. Walking to the school together, hand in hand, felt different. It wasn't her anonymous nighttime entrance. She was walking in during the bright, chaotic light of day, a parent among other parents. She felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, though in reality, no one paid her any mind. When they reached Maya's classroom, the door was propped open. The room was buzzing. A man in a firefighter's uniform was just finishing up, letting kids touch his helmet. Near the front, waiting for his turn, was a man in pilot's uniform, and seated in the corner, looking perfectly at ease and sipping from a designer water bottle, was Cynthia. She had clearly already given her presentation on interior design, and from the fawning look on the teacher's face, it had been a resounding success. Cynthia caught Eleanor's eye and gave her a tight, condescending smile. It was a smile that said, "Good luck following that." Ms. Gable, the teacher, clapped her hands. "Okay, children, let's thank Mr. Henderson for that wonderful presentation. Next up, we have Maya's mom, Eleanor Vance." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She gave Maya's hand one last squeeze. With her worn laptop bag clutched in her other hand, she walked to the front of the room, the weight of every child's curious gaze and Cynthia's judgmental stare, pressing down on her. A hush fell over the classroom. 25 pairs of young eyes were fixed on her. Eleanor took a deep breath, the stale air of the classroom filling her lungs. Her hands felt clammy as she placed her old, scuffed laptop on the teacher's desk. It looked like a relic compared to the sleek tablet Cynthia had used for her presentation. From the corner of her eye, she could see Cynthia cross her arms, a smug, expectant look on her face. "Good morning," Eleanor began, her voice barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again, channeling the confident voice she had practiced in the empty hallways. "My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm Maya's mom." She smiled at Maya, who gave her a thumbs up, her face a beacon of pure belief. That was all Eleanor needed. "Now, I have 2 jobs at this school," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "You all know my first job. I'm the person who makes sure the school is clean and safe for you every day. You could call me a janitor, but I like to think of myself as a professional observer." A few kids giggled. She had their attention. "My job is to see things that other people miss. I see the crayons that roll under the heater. I see the homework that falls out of a backpack. I see the permission slips, like the one for today, that get left behind." She glanced briefly at Cynthia. "I see things that get lost. And because I see all these things, I saw a bigger problem. Sometimes important messages between your parents and your teachers get lost too. She turned and began to open her laptop. It whirred to life with a groan, its slow startup feeling like an eternity. "I'm not an interior designer," she said, her back to the class as she waited for the machine to boot. "I don't make things look beautiful, and I'm not a pilot who can fly you to faraway places. I'm a software developer. I build things to solve problems." The desktop finally appeared. Eleanor opened her program. "So, I decided to build a solution to the problem of lost messages. I call it Northwood Connect." She turned the laptop around to face the class. On the screen was a simple, clean interface with the school's logo at the top. It wasn't flashy. There were no fancy animations, but it was clear and intuitive. "I designed this so your parents and teachers can talk to each other directly," she explained. She pointed to a button. "If Ms. Gable needs to tell all your parents that a field trip is postponed, she can type it here and they get an instant notification on their phones. No more lost notes at the bottom of a backpack." She then clicked another tab. "I also built a digital lost and found. If I find a lunchbox or a sweater, I can take a picture and post it here. Your parents can see it and claim it." A boy in the front row, who was wearing 2 different colored socks, shot his hand up. "So if I lost my other green sock, you could find it?" Eleanor smiled. "Exactly. If I find it, you'll know." The teacher, Ms. Gable, leaned forward, her eyes wide with interest. Cynthia, in the corner, had stopped sipping her water. Her smug smile had vanished, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. "But the most important part," Eleanor said, her confidence surging, "is this." She clicked on a feature labeled Teacher's Notes. "Sometimes your teachers want to tell your parents something wonderful you did. Maybe you were extra kind to a friend, or you finally solved a really tough math problem. With this, Ms. Gable can send a private note directly to your parents, just to tell them how amazing you are." A collective ooh went through the room. The children were completely captivated. This wasn't some abstract job. This was something for them. It was about them. Eleanor concluded, "So, being a software developer isn't about having the fanciest computer or the most impressive title. It's about seeing a problem and using your creativity and your skills to build a solution that helps people. It's about building connections." She closed her laptop. The room was silent for a moment, and then Ms. Gable started to clap. The children, following her lead, burst into enthusiastic applause. Eleanor looked at Maya, whose face was shining with so much pride it seemed to light up the entire room. "Mrs. Vance," Ms. Gable said, her voice filled with genuine excitement. "That is absolutely brilliant. Is that a real program? Is that something our school could actually use?" Before Eleanor could answer, Cynthia stood up, gathering her things with a brisk, flustered motion. She didn't look at Eleanor. She gave a quick, tight smile to the teacher and slipped out the door without a word, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume and quiet defeat in her wake. The applause slowly faded, leaving a stunned, electric silence in its wake. Eleanor felt as though she had just run a marathon, her legs shaky, but her spirit soaring. As the children began to chatter excitedly amongst themselves, Ms. Gable hurried over to her desk, her face flushed with a kind of breathless wonder that Eleanor had only ever seen her use when a student had a major breakthrough in reading. "Eleanor, I'm speechless," the teacher stammered, gesturing towards the laptop where the Northwood Connect logo still glowed. "I thought you were just going to talk about, well, cleaning. No offense. But this, how did you do this? Is it secure? Could it really handle the district's privacy requirements?" The rapid-fire questions were music to Eleanor's ears. These were the questions she had been asking herself for months, the problems she had meticulously solved in the dead of night. She answered calmly, explaining the encryption she used for the messaging portal, the secure cloud server where the data was hosted, and the user permission hierarchy she had built to ensure that only verified teachers and parents could access sensitive information. She wasn't just a dreamer. She had done the work. A few other parents who had stayed to watch the presentations were listening in, their expressions a mixture of surprise and deep respect. The man in the pilot's uniform gave her a solid nod of approval. "That's some seriously impressive work," he said. "Impressive doesn't cover it," Ms. Gable insisted, her mind clearly racing. "The amount of time this would save, the parent-teacher conferences I could pre-schedule, the allergy alerts alone. Eleanor, you have to show this to Principal Davison. Right now." Before Eleanor could protest, Ms. Gable was ushering her toward the classroom door. Maya, who had been patiently waiting, grabbed her mother's free hand, her small fingers squeezing tight. "You are the best one, Mom," she whispered, her voice fierce with pride. They walked down the hall to the principal's office. a journey Eleanor had made hundreds of times but had never felt like this. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was a creator. Principal Davison was a kind, weary-looking man in his late 50s, with a reputation for being fair but immovably practical. He looked up from a mountain of paperwork as they entered, his expression shifting from mild annoyance at the interruption to curiosity as he saw Ms. Gable's animated face. "Ms. Gable, Mrs. Vance, is everything all right?" he asked. "More than all right, Mark," the teacher enthused. "You need to see what Eleanor has built." For the next 10 minutes, in the quiet of the principal's office, Eleanor gave her presentation again. This time it was different. She wasn't talking to children. She was talking to the man who held the budget, who dealt with angry parents and district mandates. She focused on the administrative benefits, the reduction in paper and printing costs, the streamlined communication that would reduce parent complaints, the improved data tracking for student engagement, and the significant liability reduction that came with the allergy and medical alert system. Principal Davison listened intently, his face unreadable. He stroked his chin, his eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't interrupt with praise. Instead, when she finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked a series of pointed, challenging questions. Who pays for the server hosting? What's the protocol for data backup and recovery? How would this integrate with the district's existing student information system? Eleanor had an answer for every single one. She had spent sleepless nights worrying about these exact issues, researching solutions, and building them into her design. The principal's skepticism didn't deflate her. It energized her because he was taking it seriously. He was treating it not as a parent's fun idea, but as a viable piece of technology. Finally, he nodded slowly. "This is very comprehensive, Ms. Vance," he said, the word comprehensive feeling like a hard-won trophy. "I need to run this by the district's IT department. There are protocols for these things, as you can imagine. Thank you for sharing your project with us." The word project felt a little deflating after the victory in the classroom, but Eleanor managed a grateful smile. "Thank you for your time, Principal Davison." As she and Maya left the office and stepped back out into the bright afternoon sun, Maya was practically skipping. "He's going to use it, Mom. I know he is. Everyone will see." Eleanor felt a cautious optimism. She knew the sluggish pace of bureaucracy, but for the first time there was a clear path forward, however long and fraught with obstacles it might be. Walking home, Maya looked up at her and said, "You know, Cynthia's face looked really funny when you were talking. It looked like she ate a sour grape." Eleanor let out a real, unburdened laugh, the sound echoing in the quiet street. "Yeah," she said. "It kind of did." The real victory of the day came a moment later, when Maya squeezed her hand and said with simple, profound sincerity, "I'm really glad you're my mom." The next 2 days were a strange return to routine. Eleanor went to her night shift at the school, but the familiar silence of the halls felt different. It was no longer a symbol of her lonely, invisible labor. It was the place that had inspired her. It was her office, her think tank, the kingdom whose problems she had quietly, brilliantly solved. The news of her presentation had rippled through the school's staff. Teachers she barely knew gave her warm smiles in the hallways. Another janitor clapped her on the shoulder and said, "Heard you showed them a thing or two, Eleanor. Way to go." Then, on Friday evening, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was stark and official. Formal presentation request. Northwood Connect. It was from Principal Davison. He formally requested that she present her application at the upcoming monthly school board meeting, in front of the superintendent and the elected board members who governed the entire district. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the true test. It wasn't a classroom presentation or an impromptu meeting. This was a formal, high-stakes pitch. The fear returned, cold and sharp, but this time it was different. It was overshadowed by a powerful, thrilling sense of possibility. She looked at her worn laptop, not as a symbol of her secret double life, but as the key to unlocking a new one. The weekend passed in a blur of nervous energy. The initial euphoria of the principal's email slowly gave way to the sobering reality of the task ahead. This wasn't career day. The school board was a different beast entirely, a panel of serious, budget-minded officials who answered to the entire district, not just to the parents of Northwood Elementary. Eleanor threw herself into preparation. She refined her presentation, adding slides that focused on scalability. She created budget projections, estimating server costs, maintenance needs, and potential savings. She worked with a quiet, fierce intensity, her small apartment lit by the glow of her laptop screen late into the night. But as she worked, a familiar, insidious voice of doubt began to whisper in her ear. "Who are you to do this? You mop floors. They're going to see your worn-out blazer and laugh you out of the room. The fear was so potent it was almost paralyzing. On Monday, as she was leaving her shift, a teacher named Mr. Henderson stopped her. "I used to be the union rep," he said gruffly. "I've sat through more of those board meetings than I care to count. They're not going to care about the user interface. They're going to have 3 questions. 1, how much does it cost? 2, how much will it save? 3, does it expose us to any lawsuits? Lead with the money, end with the liability." That's the only language they really speak. The advice was a small shield, but it helped. That night, when Maya saw the worry on her mother's face, she gave her a handmade card. On the front, drawn in crayon, was a superhero with a mop in one hand and a laptop in the other. Inside, it read, "You can do it, Mom. You are the smartest person I know." The day of the presentation arrived. Just as Eleanor was about to leave, she received a text message from an unknown number. "Heard you're presenting your little app to the board. Just so you know, I've shared my concerns with a few other parents about data privacy. It would be a shame if a child's private information got out because of an amateur's coding. Be careful." It had to be Cynthia. For a moment, Eleanor felt the urge to retreat, but then she looked at the crayon drawing taped to her wall. Her fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized into determination. The school board meeting room was an intimidating space, dominated by a long, polished mahogany table. At its head sat the superintendent, Dr. Eris Thorne. Eleanor took her place at the podium, her heart a frantic drum. "Good evening, Dr. Thorne, members of the board," she began. She didn't start with lost sweaters. She started with data, outlining the costs and inefficiencies of the current systems. She established the problems with cold, hard facts. Then, with a click, she brought the Northwood Connect logo up on the large screen behind her. "This is my solution," she said. For 15 minutes, she demonstrated the application, focusing on efficiency, cost-effectiveness, and risk mitigation. When she finished, the room was silent. "Ms. Vance," Dr. Thorne said, her voice sharp, "this is a very elegant solution. You built this yourself?" "Yes, ma'am," Eleanor replied. A board member leaned into his microphone. "We have an approved list of software vendors. What makes you think a homemade application can compete?" "Because none of those vendors have spent 5 years walking the halls of our schools every night," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "This application wasn't built in a boardroom. It was built in the place it's meant to serve. It's not homemade. It's custom-made." Dr. Thorne finally smiled. "What would a licensing plan look like for a pilot program?" "A pilot program would be free," Eleanor said, stunning the room. "All I ask for is a 6-month trial at Northwood. Let the results speak for themselves." It was a bold, confident gamble. Dr. Thorne looked at Principal Davison, who gave a firm nod. "Ms. Vance," the superintendent said, "I think we have a deal." 6 months later, the scent of lemon cleaner was no longer the defining smell of Eleanor's life. She now had a small, sunlit office at Northwood Elementary, her title District Technology Consultant. She was overseeing the district-wide rollout of the Northwood Connect platform. As she packed up her laptop for the day, a notification popped up. From Cynthia Reynolds. Subject, lost item. Message, my son Aiden seems to have lost his cashmere blend navy blue cardigan. Please advise. Eleanor smiled and typed a quick reply. Dear Ms. Reynolds, please check the Lost and Found tab in your Northwood Connect portal. All recovered items are photographed and logged there for your convenience. That evening, Maya ran to meet her halfway down the block. They had dinner together every night now. What do you want to do this weekend, Mom? Maya asked. Eleanor looked down at her daughter, her heart full. I was thinking, she said, we could build a pillow fort. The best pillow fort ever. They walked on, their laughter echoing in the evening air. Two architects of their own. Wonderful world. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a message of hope.